Your Honor, I'm entitled to half of everything. The house in Buckhead, the investment accounts, the trust funds, all of it. I supported my wife emotionally through her success, and Georgia law is clear about marital property. The words hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Marcus Webb stood there in that Fulton County courtroom, wearing a $1,000 suit I knew my daughter had paid for. His lawyer beside him, nodding like a puppet on strings, and I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger yet, something worse. Recognition. I'd seen this man before, not Marcus specifically, but his type. The kind who marries potential and calls it love. The kind who whispers "we" when things are good and "mine" when the music stops. My baby girl, Simone, sat at the defendant's table, and I could see her shoulders trembling even from where I sat in the back row. She was trying to hold it together, trying to be strong, but I knew my child. I'd raised her alone after her father walked out when she was 3. I'd worked double shifts as a nursing assistant, then went back to school, became an RN, then a nurse practitioner, then opened my own practice. I'd shown Simone what building something from nothing looked like. And now this man, this smiling, handsome man with his fresh Caesar fade and his cologne that probably cost more than my first car, was trying to take half of everything she'd built. But he wasn't done talking yet. Furthermore, Your Honor, Marcus continued, and I swear I saw a smirk pull at the corner of his mouth. Given my wife's substantially higher income, I'm requesting alimony payments of $15,000 per month for the next 10 years. I sacrificed my own career opportunities to support her ambitions. It's only fair that I'm compensated for that investment. The courtroom was quiet, except for the scratch of the court reporter's fingers on her stenography machine. Simone's lawyer, a sharp-eyed sister named Patricia Okonkwo, who didn't take mess from nobody, leaned over and whispered something to Simone. My daughter nodded, but her face had gone ashy. She looked like she might be sick. Marcus kept going, energized now, playing to the room like he was in a movie, and this was his big monologue. I gave up opportunities in tech consulting. I turned down job offers so I could be there for Simone when she was building her company. I was the one making dinner when she worked late. I was the one managing our household while she climbed the ladder. That has value, Your Honor. Real value. The judge, a thin black woman in her 60s with silver locks and reading glasses on a chain, looked down at the papers in front of her with an expression I couldn't quite read. She hadn't said much since the hearing started, just listened to both sides present their cases. Now she was studying something in the file with the kind of attention that made the room feel smaller. I shifted in my seat, my purse clutched tight in my lap. I hadn't planned on being here today. Simone had asked me not to come, said she needed to handle this herself, said she didn't want me to see her like this, broken down and being picked apart by the man she'd loved since college. But I couldn't stay away. I couldn't sit in my office in Decatur, seeing patients and pretending my child wasn't being gutted in a courtroom downtown. So I'd canceled my afternoon appointments, put on my navy blue suit, the one I wore when I needed to mean business, and drove straight to the courthouse. Now I was glad I'd come, because Marcus wasn't finished. He turned slightly, looking back at Simone, and his voice took on a different quality, sharper, meaner. I think we all know that without me, Simone wouldn't have had the emotional stability to succeed. She was always so stressed, so anxious. I was her rock. I was her peace. And frankly, I think I deserve to live comfortably after everything I put up with. Put up with? Simone's voice cracked across the courtroom, raw and disbelieving. She'd been silent up until now, letting her lawyer do the talking. But those words had cut through whatever restraint she'd been holding on to. Put up with? You didn't have to put up with anything, Marcus. I loved you. I gave you everything. Mrs. Webb, the judge said gently but firmly, please let your attorney speak for you. Patricia put a hand on Simone's arm, steadying her. My daughter's chest was heaving, tears streaming down her face now, and every instinct in my body screamed at me to go to her, to wrap her in my arms like I did when she was little, and some kid at school had been cruel. But I stayed in my seat, barely. Marcus's lawyer, a white man with slicked back hair and a briefcase that probably cost more than most people's rent, stepped forward. Your Honor, my client has been more than patient. He signed a prenuptial agreement that he now realizes was signed under duress. He was young, in love, and pressured by Mrs. Webb's mother. He glanced back at me, and I met his eyes without blinking, who made it clear that her daughter's assets needed protection. My client didn't have independent legal counsel at the time. The prenup is unconscionable and should be voided. And there it was. The thing I'd been waiting for them to say. The lie they'd built their entire case around. I felt a smile try to tug at my mouth, but I kept my face neutral. Not yet. Let them finish digging. The judge looked up from her papers, her gaze moving from Marcus to his lawyer to Simone, and finally, landing on me in the back row. Our eyes met, and something passed between us, something unspoken. Then she looked back down at the file. Mr. Webb, she said, her voice measured and calm. You're claiming that the prenuptial agreement signed 7 years ago was done so under duress and without proper legal representation? Yes, Your Honor, Marcus said, straightening his shoulders like he'd already won. I was 25 years old, fresh out of graduate school, and in love. I didn't understand what I was signing. Her mother made the whole thing feel like a condition of the marriage, and I just wanted to marry Simone. I trusted her family. The judge nodded slowly, writing something down. And you're requesting that this court void the prenuptial agreement and award you 50% of all marital assets acquired during the marriage, plus substantial alimony? That's correct, Your Honor. It's only fair. Community property state and all. The judge set down her pen and looked at Marcus for a long moment. The courtroom was so quiet I could hear someone's phone vibrating in their pocket 3 rows ahead. Then she looked at Simone, whose face was buried in her hands, Patricia's arm around her shoulders. Then her eyes found me again in the back. Is there a Dr. Beverly Crane in the courtroom? The judge asked. The air changed. I felt it the moment my name left her lips. Marcus's head snapped around, his eyes finding me like a hawk spotting prey. His lawyer's expression flickered. Confusion, then something that might have been concern. Simone looked up, her tear-stained face registering shock. I stood up slowly, smoothing down my suit jacket. I'm Dr. Crane, Your Honor. The judge nodded. Dr. Crane, would you please approach the bench? I believe we need to establish some facts for the record. My heels clicked against the polished floor as I walked down the center aisle. I could feel every eye in that courtroom on me, the handful of other people waiting for their own hearings, the court officers by the doors, the stenographer who'd stopped typing to watch. But mostly, I felt Marcus's eyes, burning into the side of my face as I passed his table. I didn't look at him. Not yet. When I reached the front, the judge gestured to the witness stand. Dr. Crane, please be seated and state your full name for the record. I sat down, adjusted the microphone, and spoke clearly. Dr. Beverly Ann Crane. I'm a nurse practitioner and the owner of Crane Family Medical Practice in Decatur, Georgia. And what is your relationship to the parties involved in this divorce proceeding? Simone Webb is my daughter. Marcus Webb is... I paused, choosing my words carefully. Was my son-in-law. The judge nodded. Dr. Crane, Mr. Webb's attorney has made certain claims about the circumstances surrounding the prenuptial agreement signed prior to your daughter's marriage. Specifically, that you pressured Mr. Webb into signing without proper legal representation. Can you speak to that? This was it. The moment I'd been waiting for since I walked into this courtroom and heard Marcus spinning his lies. Your Honor, I said, my voice steady and clear. That's absolutely false. When Marcus and Simone got engaged, I didn't pressure anyone to sign anything. In fact, I insisted that Marcus have his own attorney review any prenuptial agreement before signing. I paid for that attorney myself. Marcus's lawyer shot to his feet. Objection, Your Honor. This is hearsay and... Sit down, counselor, the judge said, not even looking at him. Her eyes were on me. Dr. Crane, you're saying you paid for Mr. Webb to have independent legal counsel? Yes, ma'am. I hired attorney Donald Richardson from Richardson and Associates in Atlanta. He specializes in family law and prenuptial agreements. I paid his retainer $5,000, and he met with Marcus 3 separate times before the prenup was signed. I have the receipts, the correspondence, and Mr. Richardson's notes from those meetings. I brought copies with me today, just in case they were needed. I reached into my purse and pulled out a manila folder. Patricia Okonkwo's face broke into the first smile I'd seen all day. Marcus's lawyer looked like someone had just told him his car was getting towed. And Marcus looked like he'd seen a ghost. But what happened next shocked everyone in that courtroom, including me. The judge took the folder from my hands and began flipping through the documents. Each page she turned felt like another nail in Marcus's coffin, and I could see him shifting in his seat, whispering urgently to his lawyer. His whole posture had changed. The confidence, that swagger he'd walked in with, it was evaporating like morning dew under a hot sun. I glanced over at Simone. She was staring at me with wide eyes, her mouth slightly open. She hadn't known I'd kept all of this. Hell, I don't think she remembered half the details from back then. She'd been so in love, so focused on planning the wedding and building her startup. She'd left the legal stuff to the lawyers and to me, trusting that the adults in the room would handle it. And I had handled it. Because I'd seen something in Marcus Webb even back then. Something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Not enough to stop the wedding, he'd been charming, attentive, and Simone had loved him with her whole heart. But enough to make me careful. Enough to make me document everything. The judge looked up from the papers. These are very thorough, Dr. Crane. Email correspondence between you and Attorney Richardson, meeting notes, signed acknowledgments from Mr. Webb that he understood his rights and had adequate time to review the prenuptial agreement. She looked over at Marcus. Mr. Webb, did you meet with Attorney Donald Richardson 3 times in August of 2018 to discuss the prenuptial agreement? Marcus swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed in his throat. I don't recall the exact number of meetings, Your Honor. You don't recall? The judge's voice was dry as desert sand. These notes indicate that in your 3rd meeting, you asked Attorney Richardson about the possibility of negotiating for a higher settlement in the event of divorce. Do you recall that conversation? The courtroom went silent. Even the court officers seemed to lean in closer. Marcus's face had gone from confident to cornered. Your Honor, I was just trying to understand my options. Your options? The judge cut him off, her voice sharp now. Mr. Webb, you stood before this court today and claimed you signed that prenuptial agreement under duress, without legal representation, pressured by your future mother-in-law. But these documents show that not only did you have legal representation, paid for by that same mother-in-law, but that you actively discussed strategy for a potential divorce before you even got married. Marcus's lawyer stood up, his face red. Your Honor, this is... Sit down. The judge's words could have frozen fire. I'm not done. She turned back to me. Dr. Crane, is there anything else in this file I should know about? I took a deep breath. This was the part I'd been dreading, the part that would hurt Simone the most. But she deserved the truth. She deserved to know exactly who she'd married. Yes, Your Honor. There are bank statements from a joint account Marcus and I set up before the wedding. Excuse me? The judge leaned forward. You and Mr. Webb had a joint account? Not exactly, ma'am. When Marcus and Simone got engaged, he told me he wanted to contribute to the wedding. Said his family wasn't in a position to help financially, but he wanted to do his part as the groom. Said it was important to his pride that he not look like he was being carried by Simone's family. I saw Simone's face crumple. She remembered this conversation. We'd had it at Sunday dinner, Marcus sitting at my table, eating my pot roast, and talking about how important it was for him to provide, to be a man who contributed. He'd been so earnest, so convincing. So I opened an account and put $20,000 in it, I continued. Told him it was a wedding fund, that we'd use it together to pay for things, the photographer, the flowers, the venue deposit. I made him a joint account holder so he could access the money and write checks as needed. I wanted him to feel like he was part of the planning, part of the financial contribution. The judge was watching me carefully. And what happened to that money? Within 2 months, Your Honor, Marcus had withdrawn $18,000. When I asked him about it, he said he'd paid vendors, taken care of deposits. But when I contacted those vendors directly, they had no record of payments from him. The money was just gone. Simone made a sound, a small, broken gasp that cut through me like a blade. She'd never known. I'd never told her. I'd covered those wedding expenses myself, paid the vendors again out of my own pocket. And I'd kept quiet because I didn't want to ruin her big day. Didn't want to plant seeds of doubt in her marriage before it even started. Maybe that had been a mistake. Maybe I should have told her then. But hindsight is 20/20, and in the moment, I'd thought I was protecting her. Thought maybe Marcus would grow up, step up, prove me wrong. He hadn't. Do you have documentation of these withdrawals? The judge asked. Yes, ma'am. Bank statements from 2018 showing every transaction. And I have emails from the vendors confirming they never received payment from Marcus Webb. I pulled out another folder. This one was thicker. Marcus's lawyer was on his feet again. Your Honor, this is character assassination. These financial matters from 7 years ago have no bearing on— They have every bearing on this case, the judge interrupted. Your client came into my courtroom claiming he was a supportive, sacrificing spouse who gave up his career to emotionally support his wife. He claimed he was pressured into a prenuptial agreement without proper legal counsel. But what we're seeing is a pattern of deception and financial opportunism that predates the marriage itself. She turned to Marcus directly, and her voice was colder than I'd heard it yet. Mr. Webb, did you steal $18,000 from your future mother-in-law before your wedding? The word steal hung in the air like an accusation and a verdict all at once. Marcus stood up, and for the first time, I saw real fear in his eyes. Your Honor, I can explain. I had some debts. Some things I needed to take care of before the wedding. I was going to pay it back. Debts? The judge's eyebrows rose. What kind of debts? Marcus looked at his lawyer, but the man offered no help. He was probably calculating how quickly he could distance himself from this disaster. Marcus looked at Simone, but she was staring at the table, tears streaming silently down her face. Finally, he looked at me, and in that moment, I saw him clearly. Not the charming man who'd courted my daughter, not the smooth-talking professional who'd convinced her he was her partner. Just a man who'd been caught, a man who'd built a house of cards and watched it collapse. Gambling, he said quietly. I had gambling debts. I was into some people for money, and I thought I could fix it before the wedding. I thought once Simone and I were married, once her company took off, I'd be able to pay everything back, and no one would know. The courtroom erupted in whispers. The judge banged her gavel once, and silence fell immediately. So you married my daughter to solve your financial problems, I said, not even trying to keep the contempt out of my voice. Marcus's eyes flashed. I loved her. I still love her. You don't steal from people you love, I shot back. You don't marry someone planning for the divorce before the wedding even happens. You don't quit your job and live off your wife's success while telling everyone you sacrificed your career. Your Honor, Patricia Okonkwo stood up, her voice ringing with righteous fury. I'd like to submit additional evidence to the court. Financial records showing that during the 7 years of this marriage, Mr. Webb contributed less than 8% to the household income. Records showing that Mrs. Webb paid for his car, his clothes, his lifestyle. Records showing that when she confronted him about seeking employment 2 years ago, he told her that her success was their success, and that his job was to manage the home, which apparently meant playing golf 3 days a week and taking trips to Vegas with money from their joint account. She slapped a thick binder on the table. We have credit card statements showing thousands of dollars spent at casinos. We have testimony from Mrs. Webb's business partners that Mr. Webb attempted to involve himself in company decisions despite having no equity or role in the business. We have evidence that he opened credit cards in Mrs. Webb's name without her knowledge. Objection! Marcus's lawyer was desperate now. Your Honor, we weren't prepared for this. You weren't prepared because your client lied to you, the judge said flatly. She looked at the binder Patricia had placed on the table, then at Marcus, then at me, still sitting in the witness stand. Dr. Crane, how long have you known about your son-in-law's behavior? I've suspected for years, Your Honor, but I didn't have proof until Simone came to me 6 months ago and told me she wanted a divorce. That's when she showed me everything, the credit cards, the bank statements, the lies. That's when we both realized the full extent of what had been happening. And why didn't you come forward sooner? Why did you let your daughter stay in this marriage? It was a fair question. One I'd asked myself 1,000 times in the middle of sleepless nights. Because she loved him, Your Honor. Because she's a grown woman who has to make her own choices. Because I've learned the hard way that you can't protect your children from every mistake. Sometimes they have to learn for themselves. My voice cracked slightly. But I'll be damned if I let him profit from hurting her. I'll be damned if I sit silent while he tries to take half of everything she built while he was bleeding her dry. The judge nodded slowly. She looked at Marcus for a long moment, and I could see her forming her decision. This wasn't a complicated case anymore. This wasn't a story of two people who fell out of love and needed to divide assets fairly. This was a story as old as time, a predator who'd chosen his prey carefully and was now shocked that his prey had teeth. Mr. Webb, the judge said, I'm going to ask you one question, and I want you to think very carefully before you answer. Do you love Simone Webb? Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at Simone, who'd finally raised her head to look at him. Her face was a mask of pain and betrayal, but there was something else there too. A hardness I recognized. She looked like me now, like a woman who'd been through the fire and come out forged in steel. Marcus started, then stopped. For the first time since I'd known him, he seemed at a loss for words. Because here's what I see, the judge continued. I see a man who courted a brilliant young woman, convinced her family he was worthy, stole money before the wedding even happened, married her knowing he had massive debts, contributed almost nothing financially to the marriage, racked up more debt gambling, involved himself in her business affairs inappropriately, and is now standing in my courtroom asking for millions of dollars because he claims he supported her emotionally. She paused. That's not love, Mr. Webb. That's a con. The word hit like a slap. Marcus flinched visibly. Your Honor, his lawyer tried one more time. My client still has rights under Georgia law. Your client has the rights afforded by the prenuptial agreement he signed with full legal representation. The judge cut him off. An agreement that specifically protects Mrs. Webb's premarital assets and business interests, and stipulates that in the event of divorce, each party leaves with what they brought into the marriage, plus an equal share of any jointly acquired assets. According to the financial records I'm looking at, there are no jointly acquired assets. Mrs. Webb paid for everything. She looked at Patricia. Counselor, what is your client offering Mr. Webb as a settlement? Patricia smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. $10,000, Your Honor, as a gesture of goodwill and to cover Mr. Webb's moving expenses. $10,000? Marcus exploded. That's insulting. I put 7 years into this marriage. You put 7 years into living off my daughter, I said, my voice cutting across his outburst. You put 7 years into spending her money, damaging her credit, and lying to her face. You're lucky she's offering you anything at all. The judge banged her gavel. Mr. Webb, you will control yourself in my courtroom. She looked down at her papers one more time, then back up at all of us. Here's my ruling. The prenuptial agreement stands. Mr. Webb's request to void the agreement is denied. His request for alimony is denied. His request for 50% of marital assets is denied. Mrs. Webb's offer of $10,000 is generous under the circumstances, and I'm recommending Mr. Webb accept it before I'm tempted to award him even less for wasting this court's time with fraudulent claims. Marcus looked like he'd been struck by lightning. His lawyer was already packing up his briefcase. Furthermore, the judge continued, I'm ordering Mr. Webb to vacate the marital home within 30 days. I'm granting Mrs. Webb full ownership of all vehicles currently registered in both names. And I'm issuing a restraining order prohibiting Mr. Webb from contacting Mrs. Webb's family, friends, or business associates, or from involving himself in any capacity with her business ventures. She looked at Marcus one last time. You came into this courtroom expecting to walk away a rich man, Mr. Webb. Instead, you're leaving with your reputation in tatters and exactly what you brought into this marriage, which, according to these documents, was debt, lies, and a criminal level of audacity. She banged her gavel one final time. This hearing is adjourned. Mrs. Webb, you're granted a divorce decree to be finalized in 90 days. Mr. Webb, you have 10 seconds to leave my courtroom before I hold you in contempt. And just like that, it was over. The parking garage under the Fulton County Courthouse was dim and cool, a sharp contrast to the emotional inferno we'd just walked out of. I found Simone leaning against my car, her body folded in on itself like a piece of paper someone had crumpled up and tried to smooth back out. She wasn't crying anymore. She was past tears. She was in that hollow space that comes after you've cried so hard, your body has nothing left to give. I walked up slowly, giving her space to hear me coming. When I reached her, I didn't say anything at first, just stood next to her, our shoulders touching, both of us staring at the concrete wall across from my parking spot like it held answers. You kept receipts, she finally said, her voice hoarse and flat. You kept receipts from 7 years ago. I keep receipts on everything, I said softly. It's a habit from growing up poor. My mama used to say you never know when you'll need proof. The wedding money, Simone's voice cracked. He stole from you, and you never told me. You let me marry him knowing he stole from you. This was the conversation I'd been dreading, the one I'd played out in my head 1,000 different ways over the years. I didn't let you do anything, baby. You were a grown woman making her own choice. And yes, I knew he'd stolen from me, but I didn't know the full extent of who he was. I thought maybe he'd made a mistake. Thought maybe he was just young and stupid and scared. Thought maybe love would straighten him out. I turned to look at her. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. Simone shook her head, and I saw tears starting to well up again. You should have told me. You should have warned me. Would you have listened? I asked gently. If I'd come to you the week before your wedding and told you the man you loved had stolen from me, would you have called it off? Or would you have defended him, made excuses, and married him anyway while resenting me for trying to poison your happiness? She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. We both knew the answer. She would have married him anyway. Because that's what love does. It makes us blind to red flags, deaf to warnings. It makes us believe we can fix people, save them, love them into being better. I loved him, Mama. The words came out broken and small, like something a child would say. I really, really loved him. I know, baby. I know you did. And he never loved me. Not really. He saw me as a mark, a come-up, a way to live the life he wanted without having to work for it. I reached out and took her hand. It was cold, despite the muggy Atlanta heat that had followed us into the garage. No, that's not entirely true. I think he loved you as much as a man like that can love anyone, but he loved what you could give him more. And that's not the same thing. Simone squeezed my hand so hard it hurt. 7 years. I gave him 7 years of my life. 7 years of building my company, working 18-hour days, sacrificing time with friends, with you, with everyone I loved, because I thought I was building something for us, for our future, for our family. Her voice broke completely. We were supposed to start trying for a baby next year, Mama. We'd talked about it. I was going to slow down, take more time off, be a mother, and the whole time, he was just waiting, planning, figuring out how to take as much as he could when it all fell apart. Did it fall apart, or did you finally see it clearly? I asked. She looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw my daughter the way I'd always seen her, brilliant, strong, capable, but also vulnerable in the way that all truly good people are vulnerable. She'd trusted Marcus because that's who she was. She believed in people. She believed in love. She believed that if you worked hard and treated people right, they'd do the same for you. And Marcus Webb had used that against her. "Both," she finally said. It fell apart because I finally saw it clearly. 6 months ago, I found credit card statements he'd hidden. $40,000 charged at casinos in Vegas, Atlantic City, even on a cruise we took for our anniversary. He told me he'd been in the spa, at the gym, resting in the room, but he'd been gambling, losing my money hand over fist. She let out a bitter laugh. "You know what the crazy thing is? It wasn't even the money that broke me. I make good money. I could have paid off those debts. What broke me was the lying. I confronted him, and he looked me in the eye and told me he'd stopped gambling years ago. Said those charges were old, from before we got married. I knew he was lying. The dates were right there on the statements. But he insisted. Got angry with me for not trusting him. Made me feel guilty for doubting him." "Gaslighting," I said. "It's a classic manipulation tactic." "I know that now. But in the moment, I started doubting myself. Started thinking maybe I'd misread the dates. Maybe I was being paranoid." She shook her head. "It took me 2 more months to get the courage to hire a private investigator. And that's when I found out everything else. The secret credit cards, the withdrawals from our savings, the fact that he'd tried to list himself as part owner of my company on a bank application, forging my signature." My blood went cold. "He forged your signature?" "Tried to. The bank caught it because the signature didn't match. Called me to verify. That's when I knew I had to get out. That's when I knew he wasn't just struggling with addiction. He was actively trying to steal from me." We stood there in silence for a moment, both of us processing. A car drove by slowly, looking for parking, and we moved aside to let it pass. The driver, a young black woman in a business suit, gave us a sympathetic look. She probably thought we'd just come from a funeral. In a way, we had. "Patricia was amazing in there," Simone said after the car had passed. "The way she shut down every argument his lawyer made. The way she presented the evidence. She's good at her job, and she believed in you, believed in your story. Because you gave her the ammunition she needed." Simone turned to face me fully. "All those documents, all those receipts. You've been building a case for 7 years without even knowing there'd be a case." "I've been protecting you for 7 years," I corrected. "There's a difference. I didn't keep those documents hoping you'd need them. I kept them in case you ever did. And I prayed every day you wouldn't." Simone's face crumpled again, and this time I pulled her into my arms. She was taller than me now, had been since she turned 16, but in that moment, she felt small again. Like the little girl who used to climb into my lap when she'd had a bad dream, who used to hold my hand crossing the street, who used to believe I could fix anything. "I'm so stupid," she sobbed into my shoulder. "I'm so stupid." "You're not stupid. You're human. You fell in love with someone who didn't deserve you. That doesn't make you stupid. It makes you someone with a big heart who got taken advantage of by someone with no conscience." But I should have known. There were signs, so many signs. The way he'd get defensive when I asked about money. The way he always had an excuse for why he couldn't get a job. The way he'd disappear for hours and come back vague about where he'd been. "Hindsight is a luxury we don't have in real time," I said, rubbing her back the way I used to when she was little. "You can't blame yourself for not seeing what he was actively hiding from you. That's on him, not you." We stood there like that for a long time, mother and daughter, holding each other up in a parking garage while the world moved on around us. People came and went. Car engines started and stopped. Somewhere above us, the courthouse was handling case after case. Other people's dramas, other people's pain, other people's moments of truth. Finally, Simone pulled back and wiped her face with the back of her hand. "What did you see in him, Mama? Back when we first got together, When I brought him home for Sunday dinner the first time, what did you see? I thought about that day. Marcus had been 23, fresh out of business school at Morehouse, full of big dreams and bigger promises. He'd shown up in a cheap suit he'd probably rented, carrying flowers for me and wine for the table. He'd complimented my cooking, helped clear the dishes, talked about his plans to work in consulting, and eventually start his own firm. He'd been charming, attentive. He'd made Simone light up like I'd never seen her light up before. I saw a young man who was very good at saying the right things, I said honestly. I saw someone who knew how to perform, how to play a role, and I saw someone who was maybe a little too interested in your success, your plans, your potential. But I also saw how happy you were, and I thought maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe I was being one of those bitter single mothers who thinks no man is good enough for her daughter. You were right, though. Your instincts were right. My instincts were cautious. That's not the same as being right. If I'd really known, if I'd really understood who he was, I would have done more than just keep receipts. I would have sat you down and had a serious conversation. I would have insisted you wait. I stopped myself. But that's the thing about parenting adult children. You can't protect them from their own choices. You can only be there to help pick up the pieces when those choices break them. Simone nodded slowly. I'm going to be okay, right? Eventually? Yes, baby. You're going to be more than okay. Yes, baby. You're going to be more than okay. You're going to be stronger than you were before. Wiser. More careful with your heart, but not closed off. This doesn't get to break you permanently. It gets to teach you, shape you, make you more discerning, but it doesn't get to destroy you. She nodded, but I could see the doubt lingering in her eyes. I don't even know who I am without him. For 7 years, I was Marcus's wife. Everything I did, every decision I made, I thought about how it would affect us, how it would affect our future. And now there is no us. There is no future we're building together. It's just me. Just you, I repeated, and I couldn't help but smile. Baby girl, do you know how powerful just you is? You built a tech company from the ground up. You have 43 employees who depend on you. You're bringing in 7 figures annually. You own property. You have investments. You have a mind that most people would kill for. Just you is extraordinary. But I'm alone. Alone and lonely are 2 different things. You're alone right now, yes, but you have me. You have your friends, the real ones who've been calling and texting these past months, asking if you're okay. You have a whole community of people who love you. You're not isolated, you're just not partnered, and there's nothing wrong with that. Simone leaned back against the car, tilting her head up toward the concrete ceiling of the garage. Did you ever regret not remarrying after Daddy left? I thought about that question. Her father, James, had walked out when she was 3 and I was 26. He'd left me with a toddler, a nursing assistant's salary, and a mountain of his unpaid debts I didn't even know existed until the collectors started calling. I'd spent the next 15 years rebuilding, going to school, advancing my career, raising Simone, creating a stable life for both of us. There had been men along the way. A few who'd wanted something serious, but I'd been cautious, protective of my peace, protective of the life I was building. No, I said honestly. I never regretted it. I dated, I had relationships, but I never felt like I needed to remarry to be complete. And I never wanted to bring someone into your life who wasn't absolutely worthy of being there. Maybe I went too far in the other direction. Maybe I made you think marriage was something to aspire to because I'd stayed single. Maybe you thought you had to prove something. No, Mama, that's not. Simone stopped, considering. Okay, maybe a little. Maybe I wanted to show you that I could do what you couldn't, that I could pick better, that I could make it work. And that's a lot of pressure to put on a marriage, I said gently. You should marry someone because you want to build a life with them, not to prove a point or heal an old wound. She was quiet for a moment, then asked, Do you think I'll ever trust anyone again? I think you'll be more careful. But yes, you'll trust again. Not blindly and not quickly. But you will. Because the alternative is closing yourself off completely, and that's not living. That's just existing. A text notification chimed on Simone's phone. She pulled it out, glanced at it, and her face hardened. It's Marcus. He's asking if we can talk. Says he can explain everything. What are you going to do? She stared at the message for a long moment, and I could see the war happening behind her eyes. Part of her, the part that had loved him for 7 years, wanted to respond, wanted to give him one more chance to explain, to apologize, to say something that would make it all make sense. But the other part, the part that had sat in that courtroom and heard him try to steal her life's work, knew better. She deleted the message and blocked the number. I'm done talking, she said quietly. I'm done explaining. I'm done trying to understand. He had 7 years to be honest with me. He had 7 years to be the man he pretended to be. He doesn't get another minute of my time. Pride swelled in my chest. That was my daughter. That was the woman I'd raised. Good, I said. Now let's get out of this garage and go get some food. When's the last time you ate? She thought about it. Yesterday, maybe, I don't remember. That's what I thought. Come on, I'm taking you to Busy Bee. We're going to sit down, eat some real food, and figure out what the next chapter of your life looks like. Mama, I don't know if I can handle the Busy Bee right now. Too many people, too many questions. Then we'll get it to go and eat at my house. But you're eating. Your body has been running on stress and adrenaline for months, and that ends today. We drove separately, her in the Mercedes SUV she'd bought herself 3 years ago, me in my sensible Honda Accord that I'd paid off and planned to drive until the wheels fell off. The whole way to the Busy Bee on Martin Luther King Jr. Drive, I kept checking my rearview mirror to make sure she was still behind me. Old habits. When she was 16 and first got her license, I used to do the same thing, terrified every time she was out of my sight that something would happen to her. Some things never change. Your children grow up, build empires, live their own lives, but you never stop watching to make sure they're okay. The Busy Bee was packed, as always. The smell of fried chicken and collard greens hit us the moment we walked through the door, and despite everything, I saw Simone's face relax a little. This was comfort. This was home. This was the taste of Sunday dinners and celebrations and normal life. We ordered enough food for 4 people. Fried chicken, mac and cheese, collard greens, candied yams, cornbread, and sweet tea so sweet it could give you diabetes just from looking at it. The woman behind the counter, Miss Clara, took one look at Simone's face and threw in extra cornbread without charging us. You take care of yourself, baby, Miss Clara said, patting Simone's hand across the counter. Whatever you're going through, this too shall pass. Simone nodded, not trusting herself to speak, and I thanked Miss Clara for both of us. That's the thing about the Black community. We see each other. We recognize pain even when it's not spoken. We offer comfort in small gestures and extra cornbread. We took the food to my house in Decatur, the little 3-bedroom I'd bought 15 years ago when my practice first started turning a profit. It wasn't fancy, just a brick ranch with a small yard and a porch I'd furnished with rocking chairs and hanging plants. But it was mine. Paid for, no mortgage, no one could take it from me. We spread the food out on my kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped Simone with homework, where we'd had countless conversations about boys and college and career choices, where we'd planned her wedding 7 years ago with magazines and Pinterest boards and so much hope. For a while, we just ate in silence. Sometimes silence is its own kind of comfort. Sometimes you don't need words. You just need to be in the presence of someone who loves you unconditionally while you put yourself back together piece by piece. Finally, when we'd both eaten enough to remember what being human felt like, Simone spoke. I'm going to sell the house. I looked up, surprised. The house in Buckhead? But you love that house. I loved what I thought that house represented, the life I thought I was building. But every room in that place has Marcus in it. His energy, his lies, his presence. I can't live there anymore. I can't walk into the kitchen without remembering him cooking breakfast and telling me about his day. All lies. I can't sleep in that bedroom knowing he was lying next to me every night planning his exit strategy. She pushed her mac and cheese around on her plate. I'm going to sell it and buy something new. Something that's just mine. Something he never touched. Maybe a condo in Midtown, closer to the office. Or maybe I'll buy some land and build something from scratch. Either way, I need a clean slate. That's smart, I said. A fresh start in a place that only has your energy. And I'm going to therapy. Real therapy, not just the couples counseling Marcus, convinced me we needed where he spent every session playing the victim. She looked at me with determination I hadn't seen in months. I need to understand why I stayed as long as I did, why I ignored the red flags, why I let myself be gaslighted and manipulated. I need to make sure I never let anyone do this to me again. That's good, baby. That's really good. Therapy saved my life after your father left. Helped me understand my patterns, my worth, my boundaries. I'm also stepping back from the company for a little while. Not permanently. I'm not giving up what I built. But I'm promoting Keisha to interim CEO for the next 6 months while I take some time to figure out who I am outside of work and outside of being someone's wife. Keisha was Simone's right hand at the company, a brilliant software engineer who'd been with her since the beginning. If anyone could hold things down, it was her. What are you going to do with 6 months? I asked. Simone smiled for the first time all day. It was a small smile, tentative, like she was testing out whether she still remembered how. I'm going to travel. Remember when I studied abroad in Ghana during college? How I wanted to go back and explore more of West Africa, but never had time. I nodded. She'd come back from that semester transformed, glowing, full of stories about the people she'd met and the connections she'd felt to the homeland. I'm going to do that trip, properly this time. Ghana, Senegal, Nigeria, maybe South Africa. I'm going to take my time, see the sights, meet people, remember what it feels like to exist just for myself. No meetings, no deadlines, no one depending on me. Can I come? I asked, only half joking. She laughed, really laughed. Mama, you hate flying. I'd suffer through it for you. Besides, I've never been to Africa. Maybe it's time. Maybe it is, she said, and I could see her already planning. We could do 2 weeks together. Ghana first. I want to show you Cape Coast Castle, the places I visited when I was 20. Then you can come back, and I'll continue on. We spent the next hour planning, pulling out my laptop and looking at flights and hotels and itineraries. It was the most animated I'd seen Simone in months. The heaviness that had been sitting on her shoulders started to lift, just a little. She was glimpsing the possibility of a future that didn't include Marcus Webb, a future where she was the author of her own story. My phone rang around 6. It was Patricia Okonkwo. Dr. Crane, I wanted to follow up after today's hearing. Is Simone with you? She is. I'm putting you on speaker. Patricia's voice filled my kitchen, professional and warm at the same time. Simone, I wanted you to know that Marcus's attorney called me an hour ago. Marcus is accepting the settlement offer. $10,000, immediate vacation of the property, no further claims. He's signing the papers tomorrow. Simone closed her eyes, and I saw her shoulders sag with relief. It's really over? It's really over. The divorce will be finalized in 90 days, but for all practical purposes, you're done. He's out of your life legally, financially, and permanently once he signs. Thank God, Simone whispered. There's something else, Patricia continued. Marcus's attorney mentioned that Marcus wanted to apologize, wanted a chance to explain. No, Simone said firmly. I don't want his apology. I don't want his explanation. I just want him gone. That's what I told him. I also reminded him of the restraining order and made it very clear that any attempt to contact you directly or indirectly would result in immediate legal action. Thank you, Patricia, for everything. I don't know what I would have done without you. You would have been fine, Patricia said. You're stronger than you think. But I'm glad I could help. You deserved better than what he gave you, and I'm glad the judge saw through his nonsense. After we hung up, Simone sat back in her chair and let out a long, shaky breath. 90 days. In 90 days, I'll legally be Simone Crane again. Not Simone Webb, just me. Just you, I repeated. And that's more than enough. We sat there as the evening light started to fade. The remains of our feast spread across the table. And I thought about all the ways life breaks us and remakes us. About how we survive things we never thought we could survive. About how the people who love us show up in parking garages and courtrooms and kitchens with too much food, holding space for our pain until we're ready to hold it ourselves. Mama? Simone's voice was quiet. Yeah, baby? Thank you for keeping those receipts. Thank you for protecting me, even when I didn't know I needed protecting. Thank you for showing up today, even though I told you not to. I reached across the table and took her hand. Baby girl, I'd show up for you in a blizzard, a hurricane, or the apocalypse. That's what mothers do. We show up, we keep receipts, we hold the line, and when our children are ready to stand again, we stand with them. She squeezed my hand, and we sat there in the growing darkness, neither of us moving to turn on the lights. Sometimes you need to sit in the darkness for a little while before you're ready for the light. Sometimes you need to feel the weight of what you survived before you can celebrate surviving it. But we would celebrate. We would travel to Ghana and stand on the shores where our ancestors were stolen, and remember that we came from people who survived the unsurvivable. We would rebuild and restart, and remember that we were never defined by the men who failed us. We were defined by what we built, in spite of them. And someday, months or years from now, Simone would meet someone worthy of her. Someone who saw her brilliance and celebrated it instead of trying to profit from it. Someone who built with her instead of taking from her. Someone who understood that love isn't about finding someone to complete you, it's about finding someone who respects who you already are. But that was someday. Today was about survival. Today was about fried chicken and court victories and keeping receipts. Today was about a mother and daughter sitting in a kitchen, holding hands across a table, knowing that whatever came next, they'd face it together. And that was more than enough. The sunset over Cape Coast was the kind of beautiful that makes you believe in God, or ancestors, or magic, or all three at once. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple and gold, the Atlantic Ocean stretching out forever in front of us, and I stood next to my daughter on the same stretch of beach where our people had been forced onto ships centuries ago. But we were here by choice. We were here as free women. We were here as survivors. Simone had been in Africa for 4 months now, and the change in her was remarkable. She'd gained weight, good weight, healthy weight, the kind that comes from eating jollof rice and eating without stress. Her skin glowed. Her eyes were clear. She smiled easily and laughed often. She'd cut her hair into a short natural and wore traditional fabrics she'd bought in the markets, and she looked more herself than I'd seen her look in years. Maybe ever. I think I might stay longer, she said, not looking at me, still watching the sunset. Maybe another 3 months. Keisha says the company is doing great. They don't need me yet. Then stay, I said simply. Stay as long as you need to. You're not worried I'm running away? Avoiding real life? I think you're finding real life. I think for the first time in a long time, you're living instead of performing or proving or protecting, and there's nothing wrong with that. She nodded slowly. I met someone. My eyebrows rose. Oh? Nothing serious. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But there's this man, Kwame. He teaches at the university in Accra. Philosophy. He's brilliant and kind, and he has no idea who I am or what I've built or any of that. He just likes talking to me about Chinua Achebe and whether consciousness is individual or collective, and what it means to be African in the diaspora. She smiled. It's nice, being seen as a mind instead of a wallet. That sounds lovely, baby. I'm not rushing into anything. I'm taking it slow, really slow. But it's nice to remember that not every man is Marcus Webb. That there are good men out there who see women as partners, not ATMs. There are, I confirmed, and you deserve one of them, but only when you're ready. Only when you're whole enough on your own that you're choosing to share your life, not looking for someone to complete it. We stood there in comfortable silence as the sun sank lower, turning the ocean into liquid gold. Other people dotted the beach, families, couples, solo travelers like Simone, all of us pulled to this place by history and hope and the need to connect with something larger than ourselves. "I've been thinking about what I want to do when I get back," Simone said. "With the company, with my life, all of it." "Yeah? I want to pivot. The tech we've developed. It's good, it's profitable, but it's mostly serving corporations. I want to do something that serves people like us. I want to create platforms and tools for Black entrepreneurs, Black creatives, Black communities. I want to build something that makes it easier for the next generation to succeed without having to sacrifice everything like I did." Pride bloomed in my chest. "That sounds exactly like something you would do. And I want to start a foundation, something that helps Black women get out of predatory relationships, legal support, financial counseling, therapy, housing assistance, all of it. I want to make sure other women don't have to drain their savings or rely on their mother's receipts to escape men like Marcus." "Now that," I said, "sounds like a legacy." She turned to look at me, really look at me, and her eyes were shining. "I couldn't have survived this without you, Mama. You know that, right? If you hadn't kept those documents. If you hadn't shown up in that courtroom. If you hadn't been there to catch me when I fell apart. I don't know where I'd be right now." "You'd be exactly where you are," I said firmly. "Because you're strong, Simone. Stronger than you give yourself credit for. I just gave you some tools. You did the surviving." She hugged me then, right there on that beach in Ghana, and I held my daughter the way I'd held her 1,000 times before. When she was born, when she fell and scraped her knees, when her father left, when boys broke her heart in high school, when she graduated college, when she got married, when she got divorced. I'd held her through all of it, and I'd keep holding her through whatever came next. Because that's what love does. Real love. Not the conditional, opportunistic love Marcus Webb had offered, but the deep, unshakable, show up with receipts in a courtroom kind of love that says, "I see you, I believe you, and I will fight for you until my last breath." That's the love that survives. That's the love that matters. That's the love that rebuilds what betrayal breaks. As the sun finally dipped below the horizon and the sky faded from gold to deep purple, Simone pulled back and wiped her eyes. "Come on," she said. "I promised Kwame I'd meet him for dinner. There's this restaurant in town that makes the best waki you've ever tasted. Come with me. I want you to meet him." "You sure? I don't want to intrude on—" "Mama, you're not intruding. You're my family. If he's going to be in my life, even just as a friend, he needs to know where I come from. He needs to know the woman who taught me what real love looks like." So we walked up the beach together, mother and daughter, our footprints disappearing behind us in the sand as the tide came in. We'd survived betrayal. We'd survived loss. We'd survived the kind of heartbreak that's supposed to destroy people, but we were still standing, still walking, still moving forward. And in the end, that's all survival really is. Putting one foot in front of the other, keeping the receipts, showing up when it matters, and remembering that you're never alone as long as you have people who love you enough to fight for you. Marcus Webb had taken 7 years of Simone's life, but he hadn't taken her future. He hadn't taken her strength, and he damn sure hadn't taken her ability to love, trust, and build again, because receipts don't lie. The truth always surfaces. And justice, real justice, isn't just about what happens in a courtroom. It's about what happens after. It's about how we rebuild. It's about the next chapter we write for ourselves when someone tries to write our ending. And Simone's next chapter? It was going to be extraordinary. So let me ask you this. If someone showed you who they really were, not through their words, but through their actions, would you have the courage to walk away? Would you have kept the receipts? And would you believe that life after betrayal could be even better than the life you thought you were building? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to walk away from someone everyone thought was perfect for you? Have you ever wished you'd kept receipts? Let's talk about it.